So this is the third episode of building Retrosumo. Today we're going to work on a number of things. So I'm going to get list state components pulled out of the main list feed that I have in my React app. So these are things like the states of the main Retrosumo feed. So when it's loading, there's a loader. When it's empty, there's an empty state, and then when you reach the end of the list, there's an end state as well. These are all currently tied up directly in the posts component, so I want to extract those out into separate components so I can reuse them in other places later on. I also want to look at adding some validation to the form, so I'm just actually going to switch over to my desktop real quick. So I'm just going to bring up my terminal and okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the project up and running here. So let me change into the Retrosumo directory. So when I bring this code up, I'll bring it up in Visual Studio Code, and we're also going to run not yarn start once again, fall for the same mistake over and over again every single episode. Yeah, so we're just going to build the assets here and start browser sync so that we can have live reload up and running, and we'll have a look at where we are with the current state of the app. So one of the things that I know I want to add before this actually starts up is I want to add some validation for the input. So you can see here that I can type in some text into this box and press the post button, and it will post that message into the feed. But you'll notice that I can press the post button even when I don't enter even when I don't enter anything into the input field there. So if I open up my inspector, you'll see I'm getting loads of 422 errors because I'm doing some server-side validation. But obviously, I should never be able to even submit this form in the first place if I haven't entered any text into this field. So we're going to add some input validation so that this post button is only enabled when there's some text in this field. Pretty simple. We're also going to add a couple of new features to the feed. So you can see here some of these posts are updates that I've posted myself. So I'm going to add some functionality which will allow me to delete these posts as long as I'm logged in as that particular user. So that's going to force us to have a look at a couple of things. We're going to have to see about, okay, we're going to need to have an awareness of the currently logged in user. So we're going to look at the React context API for that. And then we're going to have to bring in some new components onto these components that are dependent on whether the current user is the user who posted this item in the first place. So we'll be adding the ability to delete these posts, but we'll also be then adding an edit post feature, which is going to display a little text field in line within the post, which allows you to edit it with a save button then, and once you've saved it, it will persist. So there are a couple of features that we're going to be adding. The other thing that I want to add today, and it's something that kind of really pisses me off when I'm using some products, is when you have a text area like this, and I have to tab onto the post button, and if there's other components on here, it could be it could take a few tabs to get to the post button in order to submit the form because it's a text area, right? So the enter key is going to enter a new line rather than submit the form. A lot of products get around this problem by allowing you to press the command key on a Mac or the control key on Windows or Linux and press the return or enter key to actually commit the submit on the form. So we're going to add that functionality both to this add post form and also to the edit form when we're displaying it in any particular post item. So we're going to use a library called hotkeys.js to do that, and we'll create a hook to hook into that particular library. There might be other ways of doing it, maybe something a little bit more efficient, but if anybody has any ideas on that, then just post a message in the chat. And then the last thing I'd like to do today, taking time into consideration, is add some feedback when you actually post something. So if I post a new post here, or if I update something or delete something, I want there to be a bit of feedback for the user so that they know that that's actually worked, that's been committed. So I'm going to add a toast component, which hopefully we'll be able to style to make it somewhat fit within whatever style we end up writing for the Retrosumo product. But even just getting a basic toast component up and running would be a good start for today's live stream. So with that all said, let's jump right in and start working on the list state component. So this is just something I'd left over from the last stream. So what I'm talking about is if I go into my post component here, we'll see a few examples of things that I'd like to tidy up. So the first thing here is we'll see this loader. So you can see here we have like a div and this Pacman loader component with a lot of like, you know, size unit. It's like there's a lot of props in here that are never going to change. I mean, if I want to use this loader component in any other screen in my app, and I will want to in the future, then it would be nice if I could just bring all of this in from a single component. And then the obvious benefit then going forward is that over time, if I ever want to like, you know, change this out and not have it as a Pacman loader, I can very easily do that and have that change apply across my entire app. So I want to extract all of this out into a component. So I'm just going to extract it all and put in, let's say, loader. And what we're going to do is create a new components file called list states. And in here, we'll import React. And we will export const loader and return this. So in order for this to work, we're going to need to bring in that Pacman loader. So I can take that out of the post from the post file and add it in at the top of my new list states file instead. And I think that's it. I think that's all I need here. I could like pass some of this data in through props, but right now that's actually absolutely fine as far as I'm concerned. So the next thing I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to import my loader from the list states file. So when I do that, it's working again. So if I reload, you can see the Pacman loader is still there. Hooray. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is extract a couple of more of those states. So I know I'm going to have an empty state and an end state for my lists as well. So I'm going to pull those out. So if I have a look down here, we'll see, okay, my empty state isn't very exciting right now, but let's just do that for now. And in here, we're going to say export const empty is equal to, and this is a good example of one that probably could benefit from having a prop in it from the start. So what we'll do is we'll say text is equal to no data found or something like that, right? Something really boring. And then allow them to override that by passing in a prop. So if we do that, it should still work. Ooh, it'd be helpful if I actually named it properly. So in here then we can say no posts to display. And we can evolve that empty component over time to do something more interesting, like have an icon in it or an image, or you know, make the font a bit bigger or larger or whatever it might be. So, but for now, we just want something really basic. I'm having a problem here where it's not loading. So let's have a look. I've obviously made a mistake somewhere here. That looks fine. So let's have a look at the error. Into the console. Objects are not a valid React child object with keys text. Interesting. So what have I done wrong? Okay, so empty takes in. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have this wrapped. So this is I was trying to put this in as a parameter, but what the parameter that actually comes into the empty component here is a props parameter, which is an object that contains the text property. So I can extract the text property from the props in here by using this type of syntax. So when I save that, that should resolve the problem. Sure enough, it does. So that's the empty state, and then the last state that I want to bring across is, of course, the end state. So let's have a look at that now. We have this here. So if I say again, we'll probably add in a prop for text to say, actually, you know what, I'm going to do this a little differently. So instead I'm going to, so what I'm going to do at end is say, actually have the text inside of it. And then what we can do is make it look like that. And then in here, we're going to do something similar. So we're going to say text is equal to you've reached the end of the list. And leave it like that. And what are we doing? So we're saying div, let's get rid of that. And we can say, okay, so what we can do here is we can say children or text. So we can say children and, or if no children, text. That should in theory work. So let's see how we get on with that, right? So if I scroll, okay, I'm actually going to delete some of the data that I have in my development database here. So if I go to PHP Artisan Tinker, so I'm actually, do you know what? I'm going to create a shortcut for that because that's just going to drive me crazy having to update that or type that out every time I want to use it. So we've already created aliases for PHP Unit and for Visual Studio Code. So instead we're going to say pat PHP Artisan Tinker, and let's load that up. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to say pat. Boom. Okay, so in here I'm actually going to say post all delete. Probably don't need to do it like that actually. So post delete. Post post all each delete. Okay, so let's see. So post count. Okay, so we're going to be able to test a couple of these components now. So we've got our no post to display, which is boring, but you know it works. And then what we can do is we can say factory app post create. And if we reload, there'll be one post, and boom, we've reached the end of the feed. So one thing I want to check, and I should probably bring in something like Storybook so that I can actually test out all of these different scenarios and so on. And obviously I need to start writing some tests on the client side as well. But for now, I'm just going to very quickly test what happens if I were to, instead of doing this, so let's comment this out. And instead, let's say end, just like that. You've reached the end of the list. Or if I said end text equals test, we get test. So now I have a couple of ways that I can actually bring in that. So in this case, I wanted to have the emoji wrapped in a span so that I can put a bit of spacing between it and the text. So I'm going to add it as a child component. I'm going to probably apply that logic into my loader as well, or into my empty state, because with this one, what we're saying here is children and not children and text. So let's do that and reload. Oh, broken something. Okay, so children. Oh yeah, that's because I'm not extracting children from props up here. So let's try again. And okay, that's working. So now if I come in here and say, there's definitely a command that allows me to delete all posts. Post truncate maybe. Yeah, there we go. And post count. Yeah, okay. So reload, no post to display, no post to display. Okay, that's definitely not what I wanted. So let's have a look. So in my empty, we've got no data found. Text, here we go. So not children and text. Sorry, this should be children. Okay, so we should get no post to display. Perfect. So that's that. Now what we want to do next is, that's actually it, I think. So if I come back here, we've got our loader, our empty, our end. That's it. So perfect. Okay, so with that, we have the kind of starting point completed. There is one more thing that I do want to extract out at this point, and that's, I want to create a new form component file. So in here, I'm going to again import React from React, and we're going to say export const text area field is equal to, and then okay. So with this one, let's see if we go back to the post form. For now, we're just going to literally take this, and we'll just figure out what props we need to pass through. So we're going to say value on change on change value rows is equal to 3. We'll say placeholder is equal to what's going on. And let's try that. So then what we can do here is say rows value with this one. So what I'd probably like to do here is actually this event object, I could make this a little bit nicer in terms of how it returns something up to the higher level. So I'm going to abandon the just straight up returning on this and actually return explicitly. So we'll try that. And then in here, I'm going to say const on change is equal to event. And then we're going to say, so on change, on text change, or on value change, or something like that. And in here, we're going to say const value is equal to event.target, and then we'll say on change value. And then what we can say in here is on value change. Okay, and then in this one, let's say placeholder, and autofocus should be passed through as well. So let's say autofocus. Now we could probably make this a little simpler by like basically feeding these through from props, but I don't want to do that here. I'm just going to be quite explicit. I might change my mind on that later, but for now that's absolutely fine. So this, what I want to do is I want to pass autofocus anyway. Value is equal to, I think, text, and on change we will say text, and then we're saying set text. Okay. So with that, and I don't think, oh, we need a placeholder. Of course we do. So placeholder is what's going on. I think we could actually make the default placeholder empty or even null. So what happens if we leave it out, I wonder? So we have it, what's going on, because we're passing that through. We take this out. Okay, yeah, I was afraid of that. Text area field is not defined. No, of course it's not. So we need to import text area field from form. Okay, so it just doesn't show a placeholder, which is absolutely fine. So let's, what am I after doing? Let's go back to here. Oh, come on, Joe. Right, so we're saying placeholder is equal to what's going on. Okay, so that's that. And we'll come back and style up the empty state and stuff at another time. I'm not too bothered about that right now. But for now, I think we've tidied up enough to continue on to the next item in the list. So let's clear off that task. And let's come back in here. And so what have we got next? We have input validation. So essentially what I want to do from an input validation perspective is manage the state of validity based on whether there's text or no text in this particular field. So it's a pretty straightforward validation check to add, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another state property in here called isValid, and it's going to be false by default. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to find my button. I'm probably going to need to pass this through actually. So we're going to say isValid is equal to isValid. And if I go to my post form, we'll add isValid in here. And we will say disabled is not isValid. So if I do that, I think that's actually working. Yeah, so it's not actually submitting anything when I click on that button, but you can see it's still acting as if it's disabled, if it's enabled, and that's because of Tailwind and how Tailwind is basically blanking out all the styles for the button, right? So it's kind of not doing anything by default. So what I need to do here is actually change how this looks based on it being disabled. Now I think this works, but let's double check. No, okay. So what am I going to do with this? So I thought it was disabled. Let me see. If we go to Tailwind CSS and disabled, buttons disabled. Let's see. What is? Oh yeah, here we go. Cursor not allowed. Opacity 50. Oh yeah, okay. So I don't have this. I can't do it like this, right? There's no selector there that's going to allow me to do this. But what I can do is I can say, so not is valid and opacity 50 like that. And what we can do is we can add the cursor not allowed on as well. And then you can see, there we go, perfect, right? So the button is now disabled and I get this little icon over it when I mouse over. Now, one thing I want to do as well is I want to say, I don't want this hover effect to happen when it's disabled. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's change this to is valid and have the hover effect if it's valid, otherwise don't, and do it that way instead. So our class names here are getting a little messy, but we'll come back to that at a later stage and actually do something about that later on. For now, we'll just keep going and keep adding functionality. So with that done, our post form no longer highlights when I mouse over it, which is good. But as you can see, as I type now, it doesn't actually enable the button, which isn't good. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to track this is valid state off of the text state, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new use effect in here. So let's say use effect, and we'll have a method in here. Now this is going to be dependent. I want this to run anytime the text state changes. So I'm going to pass text through as a dependency into this effect. And what we're going to basically say is set is valid to text length is greater than 0. That should do it, I think. So if I save that and reload, and then, yeah, if I say hello, it's become enabled. So hello, post, boom, works. And as you can see, it's posted it in. So hello, boom, hello. Oh, I'm after making a mistake here. So I'm after adding this cursor not allowed, even when it's enabled, which obviously is not what we want. So let me go back in here and fix that. So my cursor not allowed should only apply when the field is disabled. So if we say opacity 50 and cursor not allowed, yeah, this definitely needs to be tidied up. We might use like the class names library or something like that very soon. So one more time, post, and boom. Okay, so that's better. Right, so that is our input validation done. So let me see, I will check that off. And the next thing that we want to do is deleting posts. So when I have some posts in here that are posted by me, I want to be able to delete those posts through the UI. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some posts that aren't by me. So I'm going to say factory app post, let's say 3 create. Okay. And I'm going to add another one. So I'm going to say my own post, and we'll reload. So when I look at this, you'll see I've got like my post, I've got 3 posts by other people, and then I've got 3 more posts by me. So what I'm going to try and do now is basically add a delete button onto each of my own posts so that I can delete my own posts. To do this, I'm going to obviously need to be aware of the user that's logged in, and I don't have anything to help me with that in my app at the moment. So we're going to skip back to here, and now we need to start thinking about how we're going to get the user into the front end, the current user into the front end components. So there's a couple of things here. The first thing I want to do is I need to get it from my back end to my front end. Now I could call it, like I could write an API and I could call an API and do all of that. But it's probably overkill for what I'm trying to achieve here. Like really all I'm trying to do is see like what's the user ID of the currently logged in user. That's the only kind of information I need. That's not going to change at all as I'm using the app. So for me, it makes a lot of sense for me to actually just pass that straight from, seeing as my front end actually lives within my Laravel application, I should be able to pass that through from the Blade template view directly into the front end. So I'm going to amend this home.blade.php file, and you'll notice that I'm already doing something similar to this for the CSRF token. So if I have a quick look at, let me see, index.js, you'll see I'm like getting the CSRF token off of a meta tag, and then I'm passing that into my app as a prop. I'm going to do something very similar for my user ID. So to do that, if we, let me see, open up my home.blade.php file, and let's just duplicate this, right? So I can get rid of the comment, I know what it is. I'm going to say user-id, and we're going to say, okay, let me see, we need to get the current user. So I think auth ID is a helper that will work for that. So I should be able to tell that pretty quickly by just viewing the page source. And sure enough, my user ID is in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I need to pull that information into my Laravel app. So because I have it in here, I'm going to go back into my index.js file. And in here, we're going to again do pretty much the exact same thing, but this time say user ID and pass in user ID, and then in here we will basically say user ID is user ID, right? So that's the index.js file updated, and that still works okay. The next thing we want to do is go to my app.jsx file. So in here you can see I'm like bringing in CSRF token and adding it to my nav component, but that's not really what I want to do here, right? I don't want to have to pass. Okay, so I can get the user ID in here, right? But I don't want to have to pass that user ID into the post component, and then within the post component start passing the user ID around to everything that needs it in here. What I would much prefer to do is to have that available to me everywhere. My mouse has gone dead. Okay, we're back. So I don't want this to be something that I just want to be able to basically pull it from any component, no matter how deep it is within the app. So there's a couple of ways of doing this, like, global state within React is something that's talked about quite a lot. Some ways that you can do it, you can use a third-party library like Redux or MobX, or you can indeed use the React context API, which is built into React itself, to achieve pretty much the same thing. And for basic things like this, where I'm like passing user ID from my back end and I want to make that available to my entire front end, context API is a really simple way of doing that. So I'm gonna start off with that and go from there. So I'm just gonna look at some notes that I have on another computer about the context API, because it's a while since I've written something on this. So I believe like what we need to do is essentially we need to create a new context. Let's say a user. I think it's a provider. So context has a user or has a provider and a consumer available to the app, right? So we will be writing a new context. So I'm going to create a contexts directory, and I'm going to create a user context in there. And then what I should be able to do is wrap my app in that provider and pass in, I can never remember, value. I think it's value. So value, and then we're going to say user ID like this, or we could just say, yeah, we'll leave it at that. That's fine. So that should work. But I will also need, okay, so it's going to be broken here because user provider doesn't exist. So I'll need to create a new file, and we will call it contexts user.jsx. And in here, we're going to say, what are we going to say? And let me have a quick look at the notes again. So to use a context, again, we're going to need React. So we'll import React from form React, and we will say const user context is equal to create context. So we'll need to pull that in from React as well. And an empty object, and boom, 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 create context. And let's see, we will then, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to export the context itself as the default item, but I'm also going to export the consumer provider. And okay, so that should be my context done. And as you can see, this is now loading again, which is good. And if I come into my developer tools, we should see a context provider wrapping everything with the value, with the user ID on it, which is great. So the next thing I need to do then is basically consume that. So if we go into my post.jsx file, I should be able to bring in that context in here. So if I say import user context from, and we'll say contexts user, and then how do I use this again? So we're saying what I will want to do is essentially say, okay, what am I doing? I'm saying on a list item that I want to basically decide whether I should show a delete button or not based on whether the user is the current user. So I need to jump down to my post view item. So in here, we're going to decide whether or not to show that to the user. So it's in here that I'm actually going to want to look at that context. So I'm going to say const auth user is equal to, how do I use context? Use context. And pass in user context. So then I've already imported that, but I need to import use context from React as well. So use context. And once I have that, then I now have the auth user. So do we have that in here somewhere? Like, can we say, yeah, so we've got the context. Boom, there we go, ID 1, perfect. So what we could do is say auth user ID or current, so let's say user ID is equal to, let's do this. That should work, I think. So what we can do then is we can say, we will want to, okay, so we want to say so whether they can edit or delete it is going to be the same thing. So can edit is equal to user ID is equal to post user ID. I think that should do it. So I'm just thinking here, right? So we probably could do a couple of extra things. So we could pull the user off the post, which means that we can just do user.id. And we can also then say just user.name. And we can pull text off here as well. So instead of post.text, we can just say text, and timestamp's already done. That should work okay. The next thing we'll want to do is, what do we want to do? Okay, so we have our timestamp, we have our text. So we're going to want to add some buttons at the end of this. So I'm going to say, let's just put in a div for now. We will say button, and we'll say delete. All right, so if I put that in, like what's going to happen is it's going to show up for every post. But what I actually want to do is I want to say can edit, and then it should only show up for my own posts, but it's not working. Okay, so I've obviously created a problem here somewhere. So if let's do something pretty simple. Let's say console.log user ID and user, and see what's happening here. Okay, so we should get a load of objects printed out. So 1, 1. That's weird. So console.log Am I after doing something wrong here? False, 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 even though they match. Oh, I wonder, is this numeric? I don't think it needs to be. Maybe it does. Maybe I need to parse this. It looks like it's. If I come into components and look at context, oh, it's a string. Okay, so I'm going to need to change that. So I think the best place to probably do that will be in my index.js file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my index.js file, and in here I'm going to say parse int on this. And let's try that. So when I do that, yeah, perfect. So now my own post has a delete button, my own post has a delete button, but the posts that aren't posted by me don't have delete buttons, which is exactly what I want. So that is cool. The next thing that I'm going to do then is I'm going to close this back, and we'll go back in here, and let's add some styling concerns in here, because I'm really not happy with the way this looks right now. And we're not trying to perfect the UI and styling and everything at this particular moment in time, but it's I'd still like it to be a little bit nicer than what it is at this particular moment. So let me see, what will we do? So I suppose the first thing I want to do is I want to put the items at the end. So we'll say justify end, and that's not working. So I need to make it a flex component. Okay, so that's now at the end, which is good. And I'll probably want to create a little bit of distance from the top as well. So if let me see, if I, so let's say HTML, language mode, HTML, lorem, copy, boom, post. So not a great example, but yeah, I want a bit of distance between that and the item above it, right? So if I do that, I will say nothing too drastic. Maybe, actually, you know what? Probably a good bit of space. So let's put MT4 on it, and that's not that drastic, but that's fine. So then the next thing is I want to style the button. So I'm going to say type is equal to button. On click is, we'll just say null for now, and then the class name is where we're going to style this button. So we're going to be saying that we want it to be text small. So I want it to be small, I want it to be gray. And yeah, that's not bad. I want it to be a button, so I am going to add some padding. But I also want it so that when I mouse over it, it's clear that it's a button. So I'm actually going to make it rounded, and I'm going to add a couple of things. So I'm going to make the text a little bit. I'm gonna make it red when I hover, right? So I'm gonna say red 700, and what else? Let's just do that for now. Cool. Yeah, that's not bad. So yeah, when I click it, the focus drives me crazy. So I'm gonna say focus outline none, and focus shadow outline. Yeah, perfect. That's better. Actually, I want to put the styles on focus to be the same. And focus text red 700. So click it. Boom. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So that's the delete button in terms of displaying it on the screen for the posts that I've posted myself. So the next thing that I need to do is I actually need to make this work, right? So there's a couple of things. Firstly, on the client side, I need to create a way for this to do something. I'm just going to delete some of these console.logs. So the first thing is I'm not too keen on calling a delete function in here, other than maybe to like cancel an event or something like that. But I think it'd be much better if I were to essentially pass pass that up the chain to, let's say, the post form up here, because in the post form, or in the post component, the top level post component, I think there's a lot more scope here to manipulate the list of posts dynamically without having to go back to the server to fetch a new API call. So let's add it up here. So we've got some use effects. I'm going to, oh yeah, so here we have store post. So let's have delete post, and we will make it another API call. So in here, we'll say try catch error and console.error. Obviously, you need to come back at a later point and put in much better error handling and what have you. But for now, this is absolutely fine. So, and in here, we're going to say delete the post. But actually, we're not, right? So what we might do is, I want this to be like an async. I want to confirm that the user wants to delete the post before actually deleting it. So what should I do on that? Can I do that in an async? I can. Right, so let's see. So if I will say, I'll say const confirm message is equal to, are you sure you want to delete this post? And then I'm going to say if confirm message, and like that, then run this try catch, and what we'll do then is we'll say, okay, so once we'll say, just for now we'll say alert deleted, right, which you would never do, but let's just do that anyway, right? So then when I click on delete, nothing's happening. That's because I haven't actually wired it up. So I need to pass, let's say delete post into my post feed, and then I'm going to also pass that down the chain. So delete post and delete post. So again, with this, I mean, potentially could use context for our feed, but for now we're just going to keep it pretty simple. We may come back and actually look at that in a future stream. For now, okay, so we've got delete post, and then what we're going to say is in here, we're going to say delete post. So that should, in theory, do something. So click that. Are you sure you want to delete this post? No. Yep. Okay, deleted. Boom. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is get get an API working for this, right? So we need an API that will actually delete the posts for us, right? So I'll need to go back to my API routes, and in here we've only got 2 at the moment, so we'll need to delete posts post controller at destroy. We could probably use a resource controller, but as you can see, my posts should be visible to people who aren't logged in, but they shouldn't be able to do anything with them unless they're logged in. So that's why I have them broken out like this. Plus, I don't like using magic methods to create routes that I may not need at some point in the future. So that's why I have it done this way. So that's that created. The next thing I'm going to need to do is go into the controller. Sorry, post controller. And in here, we do have it scaffolded out already, right? So we have the post coming in as an argument into this. So there's a couple of things. Firstly, we're going to need to validate that the user is the post user. Now we can easily do that in here, but I'm going to go a step further and implement a nice feature of Laravel called policies, which will allow us to attach a policy to a model quite easily. So it's just like, I know this is really simple right now, but as things get a little bit more complicated, I like having my my authorization logic pulled out of the controllers themselves as much as possible. So so we'll do that. I just noticed I don't have the to-dos advanced to-do. No, comments. Better comments, that's all. So I'm just going to install that extension for VS Code here, and we will, yeah, it's already working. So my to-dos are now highlighted differently to my regular comments, which is nice. So validate that the post, or that the user is the post user, and then we can just basically delete the post and return success is true or something like that. When you delete something, should you return a different HTTP status code? I can never remember this. So a successful response of delete request should be HTTP response code 200. Okay, if the response includes an entity describing the status. 202 if the action has been queued. Or 204, no content if the action has been performed, but the response does not include an entity. Okay, so in that case, rather than me returning this thing, which is not very useful, I could do this instead, right? That should be okay. So let's do this for now, right? Now this is a gaping hole in my code, and I really should write a test around this. And we'll come back and do that in just a second. But for now, let's just actually prove that I can get the front end working, right? So if we jump back to the post.jsx file, in here in my delete post, now I can basically start to work with the post. Okay, so const. Okay, immediately we have a problem. So we need to bring in an ID in here. So to do that, I'm going to have to change how I'm calling this post, or this delete post method. So if I look at ID, do we have an ID? We don't at the moment, but we can easily get one off of the post. So we'll do that, and then we should be able to pass the delete post ID, and in here we should then be able to say, okay, well, we want to const. We want to do anything. We probably don't really care, but we can do axios.delete, and then we'll say API posts. So let's change this to have the different string syntax, which will allow us to just pass the ID in like this. And that's all we should need. And then what we can do is we will say console.log deleted, right? So that'll be a start. So let's see, we delete this, okay. And bring up the console, delete it. Okay, so we reload and it's gone, perfect. But as you can see, like when I deleted it, it stayed in the list, right? So let's fix that straight away. So the quickest way for me to get the item that I've been trying to delete is to filter my list, right? So what I'm going to do that is pretty simple. So I've got a set posts method, so let's use that. And then let's say posts.filter, and then I'm going to pass in p for post, and I'm going to say where the PID. So I want to filter the post to not include the post that I just deleted. So I'm going to basically say where the PID is not equal to ID. Is that a fair one to do? I think that's pretty much what I'm trying to achieve here. So if I delete my own post, okay, boom, it's gone. Brilliant. That's exactly what I want. Okay, that's perfect. So now I've got delete post working. But we do have one problem that we need to fix, and that is that I could technically create an API call to actually delete this post, even though I'm not the person who posted that, right? So what I want to do to test, I'm going to write a test for that first, right? So if I go into my feature tests, we've got a lot of stuff in here around people creating posts and so on, right? So what I'm going to say is, okay, so test, and we'll say public function user can not delete other users' posts. So to do this, what we'll do is we'll say user, so user is equal to factory app user create, and we'll say passport acting as user. And then what we're going to say is we're going to do a couple of things. So we're going to, what are we going to do? We're going to create a couple of posts. So we're going to create other user post. We might rename this and say can only delete their own posts. So user can only delete their own posts. And let's see. So let's say own post is the factory app post create, and we'll pass in user ID of user. And what we can do then is say response is equal to this JSON delete API posts, and we'll say own post ID. And that should be that. And then what we should say is response assert status 204, right? So if you run that, that should actually work. So if I run my PHP unit, oh, see 405. It's 405 again. 405 HTTP status. I'm pretty sure I Googled this in the last stream as well. Method not allowed. Okay, that's weird. So JSON, oh, well, it would be helpful if I spelled it right, wouldn't it? So that's a delete. So let's see. Okay, so that test is passing, but that's not the test I'm particularly interested in here. So other user post is basically just creating an app post without passing in the user ID. And now when I do this, I should basically say, so let's say test that I can delete no post. And then test that I can't delete other users' posts. And in here, when I do, so when I say hey, other user post, what I can do then is I can say response assert status 403. So when I run this, it should fail because I've passed in something I shouldn't have. Okay, so other user post ID. That looks okay to me. Oh, sorry, I should have created this. So rerun and expected status 403, but receive 204. And this is obviously not what we want. We want to receive a 403 forbidden error message because I shouldn't have access to delete this post. So let's go ahead and actually fix that. So the easiest thing to do would be to basically check the post ID in here against the logged in user. But what I want to do is I want to create a Laravel policy instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I'm actually going to add another little helper in here. I'm going to call it PA, which is going to be PHP artisan. And then what I'm going to say is source HRC, and then I'm going to say PA make, what am I making? I am making a policy. And let's get some help with that. So policy, and we're going to call it a post policy. And we're going to say post. So when I come in here now, we should have a post policy.php file, and we do. And you can see in here what it's doing is basically it's creating like methods for all of the different kind of actions that I can perform on the model. Now I couldn't delete a lot of these because I'm not going to be using them, but the one I'm interested in right now is this user determine whether the user can delete the post. So what I can do here then is I basically need to return a Boolean that says yes, the user can delete the post, or no, the user can't delete the post. So it'll be true if they can, it'll be false if they can't. So what I'm going to basically do here is I could put any logic I want in here, but for now it's actually pretty simple. So I want to basically say return user ID is equal to post user ID. Okay, so if the user ID matches the post's user ID, then allow them to delete it, otherwise don't. Now there's a couple of extra things that I need to do in here. The first thing I need to do is I need to go to my auth service provider.php, and in here basically map out my policies, right? So I can say app post maps to app policies post policy. And what that'll do is it'll basically say that if you encounter an authorization check against a post model, you should look up the post policy for that, right? So that's that. And then the last thing I should need to do is basically to come back into my controller and say this authorize delete post. And once I rerun my test, oops. Oh, didn't work. Interesting. So why didn't that work? So it's 204. So authorize the delete post, and we have post policy.php delete user ID is equal to the post user ID. So what's going wrong? Is my test wrong? Other user post. Oh, sorry. Except, okay, this is weird. So it's actually failing on this. So it's basically saying that my post, it's not, oh, and I wonder, I have a feeling this is because of my strict equality check here. If I rerun, yeah, that's working. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cast these two integers rather than using a loose equality comparison, and that works. Okay, so that's my test written, which now means that I have my authorization in place for the deletion. So that's deletion done. So delete all posts, done. Okay, so I'm going way over time here in terms of what I expected to spend working on this particular feature, but I'm going to keep going because I would like to get as much of this stuff done as possible today. So we'll keep going for a while and run a little bit over time today. So, okay, what's next? Editing posts, right? So editing posts, we've already put in a little bit of the plumbing for that. So I'm just going to delete, or not delete, I'm just going to close my windows here. And let's open up my post.jsx file again. And in here, so we're going to, as you can imagine, we're going to have like an update post method in here. But we're going to need to have something a little bit more substantial to show, like, for editing, right? So in here, like, firstly, that's sort of the button, right? So if, whoops, so if I copy that and basically say edit, we don't want to delete the post, obviously, so we're just going to say null for now. And then we'll also want to do stuff a little bit differently. So I don't want them to be red for obvious reasons. So let's change them to be gray because, you know, editing isn't a destructive action, so it doesn't make any sense for that button to be gray when I hover. But other than that, that looks okay to me. I think I'll probably need to put in some margin and stuff because it's going to look ridiculous, right? So they're a bit close together. Especially, like, you'd probably get away with it if I just had them as links. But because they're actually buttons with like a background when you mouse over, I think they probably need a little bit of spacing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to say mx2. Let's try that. Now what we're going to find is there's going to be a bit of margin to the right hand side of the items. I'm just going to create a new post just to make it easier to look at this, right? So yeah, that's much better. But I don't like that this is now not aligned with the right hand side of the timestamp. So what I need to do then is apply a little bit of negative margin on the parent component to basically account for that. And that's it. Okay, so I'm not mad keen that, because you can see here it's not flush because the button itself, like, obviously has padding on it, so that's why it's not flush. But look, it's fine for now. We could just change it to be an underlined style instead of doing it this way, but as I say, for now, I'm okay with what we have here. So that's our edit button. The next thing we need to do is get our edit button actually working and doing something for us. Let's get some caffeine. Okay, so the edit button, what should the edit button actually do here? So if you think about it, what's going to happen is it should replace the text that we have here with a text area, and these buttons should also hide temporarily, and instead show a save or cancel, save and cancel button so that we can actually perform the edit or actually cancel and go back to this state, right? So we're going to need to have a new state for this particular list item, where we essentially have whether this particular post is currently being edited or not, right? So to do this, let's jump back into here and we'll create a new state object. So we'll say is editing, and we'll say set is editing, and also this should be false by default. So use state false, and we will then, what do we need to do next, right? So the first thing is obviously this button, this edit button should set is editing to true. And then if is editing is true, we should probably not show these things, right? So if not is editing, show these, otherwise don't. Okay, I'm actually breaking something there, I think. Oh yeah, so I need to wrap a fragment around these. So let's wrap a React fragment. And that is that. So now what will happen is this will just disappear when I go into edit mode. Yeah, obviously, which isn't great because I can't get out of edit mode. So we're going to need to have the opposite in place as well. So we're going to have to say if is editing and do something. And obviously, you know, show something else when it is actually enabled, right? So what do we want to do here? So we're saying if is editing, we will want to probably display a form. So I'm thinking at this point, like this component is getting a little large. Arguably this, you know, button toolbar should be extracted. It should be extracted into a component as well, but we'll leave it as it is for now. But I definitely don't want to be adding like a big edit form in here. So I'm gonna create a new component called edit post form, and let's do that for starters. So I'm going to go back to where my post form is. Now, I'm going to keep these separate just for now, but once we're finished, there may be an opportunity maybe in the next stream to tidy it up and actually, you know, a lot of these will have probably the same type of thing happening in them. So let's see how we get on and see are there any things that can be extracted from these particular items, right? So what I want to do is essentially we'll just say we will have state in this form for sure. So let's return, and what do we want to put into this form? So it's going to be a form for starters, right? So we'll have form, we'll have an onSubmit function, which will call a submit function. So we will say const submit is equal to event, and this will say event.prevent default and do some other stuff. Right, so that's the kind of basics. What else will this form have? So it will need to have pretty much the same as this form, right? Not quite, not far off. So let's just take these for now and make these our starting point, right? So this should be save instead of post, and we'll need a cancel button as well. So onClick is equal to who? Hide. So we will need like a hide edit form or cancel on cancel, something like that. And then on cancel, and then we'll say type is equal to button, and we will say cancel, and we'll need to style this up in just a second as well. We have a couple of other things going on in here. It's like is valid, text, all of that kind of stuff. So we'll definitely need to pass stuff through there. But for now, let's just get this on cancel is equal to, and basically set is editing to false. Okay. So let's just comment out these things that I added in a second ago. So we'll comment out this button here and this text area, and let's see what happens. So we should have a cancel button. Yeah, perfect, which allows us to return the state to normal, which is perfect. Okay, so that's good. The next thing that we're going to want to do is actually look at what is actually coming through here, right? So the first thing I think is that we'll need to figure out what props we're going to pass through into this edit form. I think, like, firstly, you know, when they edit it, we shouldn't be committing the text of the edit until they actually press the save button. So we're going to want to have separate state in here for text. So use state empty string. Yeah. Okay, but we'll want that to be, let's say it will have original text, and we'll just default that to an empty string, and then we can say original text comes in to the state prop here. And then what we can do is, in this one, pass in original text as, do we have text on the post out already? We do. Text and format, and okay, that's working. So we now have the original text set on here. We're going to have the same, like we're going to have is valid and set is valid, just like we do on the other form. So this is going to be false by default. And we're going to have a slightly different twist on the validity of the edit form versus the new post form, which we'll get to in a second. But what else do we need to do? We need to, let me see. So, okay, so we're going to need to do what exactly? We'll worry about the validity in a little bit. The first thing I want to do is I want to get these components actually rendering, right? So let's get this text area field started. So the first thing we want to do is, so value is text and on change set text to text. That's pretty much fine. We probably don't really want a placeholder in this one, and we don't want autofocus. So that should be okay. So let's see what happens. Yeah, perfect. So I press edit and now I've got this text in. When I press cancel, it's gone back to the original state. Perfect. So that's a good start. But it's not, we're not there yet, right? So the next thing that we have is we have this button here that is disabled when it's not valid and does what? It submits the form. So that's okay. So let's bring that back. It might be a little big and stuff. Yeah, like that looks a bit big to me. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to work on the styling of these buttons just really quickly. So the first thing we're going to do is do what exactly? So if we have a look at the styling here, I'm just going to, just give me 1 second. I just need to look at a mail real quick. Okay, so right, so what we're going to do is just, yeah, so sorry, coming back to this, what we're going to do is we will have a bit of spacing on these buttons so they're very close together right now. So we're going to say MX2, and that's not bad, but we'll obviously want that on here as well. MX2 edit, okay, that's definitely better. We'll probably want to have negative margin on the container like we did on the other one. That's perfect. Okay. We'll definitely need to abstract this button into like a standard button component as well at some point, but for now that's fine. So the other thing is just this cancel button. I don't like the look of it right now. So what we'll probably do is actually, I think the edit button, probably a good place to start for classes for that. So let's just bring that up now for a second, and I think that already has MX2 on it. It does. Uppercase, no, it doesn't have uppercase, so let's add uppercase, because just to keep it consistent with the save button. See what that looks like. Edit, save, cancel, edit. That looks pretty good. The only thing is the sizing is off, right? So I'm kind of happy to look at bringing the sizing of the save button down a little bit. So if we say PY1 instead of PY2, yeah, not sure about that. I think we might need to bring them both up to PY2. So this should be PY2. This can be PL3 maybe. Do you know what I'm going to actually do? Because I'm going to say PX3 and we'll keep them the same. So edit, save versus cancel. It's fine. So in terms of the order of these buttons, they potentially should be the other way around, but the focus order should be the way that they are right now. So if we reload, edit, cancel, and save, that looks okay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I prefer. If I like the fact that the pink is flush against the edge here, but I don't like the cancel being before it. Maybe the cancel should be shifted over to the left over here or something. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll just leave it as it is and we'll come back to it another time. That's what I don't like, is that, you know, it brings you to the cancel when you tab out of it. So I think that's something that I'd like to fix pretty quickly. So we could set tab indexes and stuff like that. But right now the tab index, I'd have to like change the text area field. So let's not go into it right now, and let's come back to that a little bit later on. Let's see. So what do we need to do next? So we have our buttons in place. So the next thing is, like, the button is never going to be actually valid, right? So I need to make sure that the validity of the text is actually taken into consideration. So if we say use effect, and in here what we're going to say is, I think we're going to need to, with this, we're going to need to treat it a little bit differently to what we had before, right? So we're definitely need to bring in text because we want it to update whenever text updates. So what we're basically saying is set is valid is, so there's two things I think here, right? So the first thing is that text.length is greater than 0, but we also want to make sure that text is not equal to the original text. Okay, so if I reload and I press edit, and you can see if I change it, it becomes enabled, whereas if I go back to the original state, it becomes disabled. And if I get rid of it, all of it, it becomes disabled as well. So that's pretty cool. I like the look of that. That's looking good to me. So that's nice. There's another thing that's kind of annoying me right now, and that is that when I click on the edit button, the element itself isn't focused. So that's something I definitely would like to fix at this particular moment in time. So focus is one of those things in React that's kind of traditionally been a little bit of a pain in the ass to deal with, because you don't have like references to DOM elements that makes it easy to like grab focus or to run like the focus method on them and things like that. Thankfully, it's gotten a little bit easier in recent times. So what we're going to do is we're going to firstly take a look at what we have here, right? We've got our text area field. We're going to give that a ref. So we're going to say our edit input, and we'll call it, whoops. What am I after doing? Yeah, that's better. Okay, so my edit input ref. And the next thing I'm going to want to do, so what we're going to want to say essentially is that when the, I think we'll use an effect here as well, right? So we'll say, when the edit input ref updates, we will want to do something. So what do we want to do? We'll want to say edit input ref dot current dot focus. Okay, so that should be that. But there's one more thing. There's one thing I've forgotten to do, and that is that I haven't actually used the use ref. So use ref, and then I knew there was something I was forgetting here. So let's jump back down, and where do we have? So I'm after losing my train of thought here. So back down here, we're going to say const, and it's edit input ref is equal to use ref null. I just want to check that, right? So if I actually come back here and say dot current, so it's actually it's suggesting that to me. So I'm going to say focus, and let's start with that, right? That's not going to work like out of the box because it's going to crash. Function components cannot be given refs. Attempts to access this ref will fail. Did you mean to use react.forward ref? And that's because I'm using this on like a functional component, which is this text area field here. So if I jump into my form.jsx file, in here we're going to need to basically use that's forward ref, I think. Forward ref, yep. And let's see, what are we doing? We're saying, I think it's literally as simple as this, just wrap it in forward ref like that. That will change things a little bit for us, right? So what we're going to now get is we're going to get, what are we going to get? We're going to say these from props, and we're also going to have ref. Does that still work? Nope, of course it doesn't. Okay, so what do we need to do here? So I know what am I doing wrong? Forward. Oh, sorry. So this needs to be wrapped around like that. And when we do that, this should work. So we've got all of our props on here, we've got a ref, and then what we should be able to do is basically say ref is ref on this. And if we reload, press edit, boom, it's focused, which is definitely an improvement. There is one issue still remaining for me though, and that is that like when I edit it, I kind of want the text to be selected because, you know, like otherwise I'm going to have to do more keyboard actions in order to like select the text, delete it, and then put in whatever I want. At the very least, the selector should be at the end of the field, not at the start. But I would like to actually do the selection, and thankfully that's really easy. All we need to do is say edit input ref dot current dot select. Let me see, what was that? Firstly, let's say const edit field is equal to edit input ref dot current, right? So that's going to give me the DOM element. So I'm going to say edit field dot focus, edit field dot selection start is equal to 0 because I want it to be at the start, and then edit field dot selection end is equal to the text dot length. Let's try that. So if I edit, boom, perfect. That's great. And then I can just type away and make my changes. So that's the state, or that's the focus state sorted, which is good. What else? So we have the focus state, we have the validation state done. I think the last thing that we need to do is actually just get the API working and actually have it update in the original. So if I say this and I press save, it should hide the field and then obviously update back in the list view itself. So let's work on that now. So the first thing we're going to want to do is basically make the same changes we made earlier to delete, but obviously a little bit more involved because we'll need to take in the new text. So we're going to say, let's have a put on posts / post controller update. This is getting to the point where it might be better to like have a resource with an accept or with an only method attached to it to like only to not do it for the index and so on. But let's leave it as it is for now. So that's our route done. So the next thing is post controller. So if we go in here, we've got our update. And what we're going to do is, like, a lot of this stuff in here is probably going to be quite similar, right? So this data, arguably we could abstract that to like a get rules method. So we could say private function get validation rules, and that could return, we'll say text is required. So we could do that. It's pretty straightforward. And then in here, we can basically say this validate, this, that, get validation rules. And then what we can do, something wrong with that. Expected 2 arguments, this stuff validation, sorry, it needs to be request, and then pass that in. So we can get that, and okay, so we can lose these because we're never going to have lay templates for these things. So we can get rid of those. We can get rid of this create method as well. We'll never use that. So let's, in our update, let's firstly validate. We'll add a little to do for authorization because I want to write a test before we do anything on that one, right? So that's getting the data from the request. Then what we want to say is post. We can just say post update data and then return response post 200. I think HTTP status code update. So when there's a push, so 200 or a 204 should imply resource updated successfully. So I think we want to update. We want to send back the post in the response. So we're going to do a 200 here, with the update happening in here. So let's just see, does this work for starters? So if we come back in here, we now need to implement this submit form. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to say update post text. Will that work? Let's see. Update post text. So we'll be passing update post into the form. And then we will do what exactly? So we will say in here, update post is equal to okay, so update post. So let's see. So this will be passing back text. So we want to say update post ID text, something like that, because we have the ID in here, so we can pass that up the chain. That should work. And then what we want to do is make sure we have an update post being passed into this feed item. That's, yeah, so we do have like prop drilling a little bit going on in here, which isn't ideal, but it's not the worst. It's only like one level down. I think it's pretty self-explanatory in this particular component as well. We're still on, like, we're only at 260 lines of code here, which isn't too bad, or when you consider the amount of functionality that we have going on in our feed already. So what we're going to do next is, what are we going to do next? We need to go back up to our posts component, and in here pass down to our post feed. Update post is update post, and this then should have a new update post method. So update post is equal to async ID text, and in here what we're essentially saying is that this will be doing what exactly? So we'll say try, and we will have catch error, console.error, error. And what else? So what we want to do now is we want to say, okay, so can we get the, so we're going to call an API. So we're going to say, what do we want to get back off that API? We want to get back, it'll be in a data property. So we're going to map that over to an updated post variable. And we're saying await. I'm going to say axios.put and API posts ID text. That's it, I think. I don't think there's anything other than that going on here. That should be okay. So with that done, then what we want to do is we need to update the post itself, right? So let's just see, does that work for starters? So no, update post is not, well, update post is definitely not going to work. So let's rename that. So hello, and let's change this to hello world. Save. Go to our network tab and filter to XHR. Hello world has come back. So when we reload the page, boom, it's worked, right? So the only thing that hasn't happened is that if I get rid of this again and go back to hello, this has stayed open, and if I cancel, it stays as hello world, right? So then I reload and it's there. So let's get it to persist in the component after we've saved it, right? So let's see, we are going to do what? We need to, okay, so this is going to be a little bit more complicated than what we've done in the past, right? Because we can't really just go set posts and then pass in, like, you know, like posts dot something, right? We can't really do that because of immutability issues and all sorts of things, right? So what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new updated posts, and we're going to use destructuring to basically like recreate that as a copy. Then we're going to we need to find the post that has been edited. So we'd say post.find index, and that is going to be, okay, so the post ID is going to be the same as the, well, we're going to say ID, right? So the post ID that's come back, or that's in the current list of posts, should match the ID of the post that we're trying to update here. And then finally, we will say updated posts with in the index is equal to updated post. And then what we should be able to do is say updated, or set posts to updated posts. And the other thing we want to do is we want to close this, right? So if we say hello world and save, okay, so we've got an error here. So post is not defined in the try catch. So what have we messed up here? Not seeing a post variable in here. Oh, here we go. This should be posts. Sorry about that. So reload, edit, hello, save, still an error. Okay, so cannot read property ID of undefined. What is that? Oh, we're not loading the user. So if I come back in here, do we have a test for that? Returns user relationship. So we probably want to do the same thing here, right? So we'll say response to start so that it has a JSON fragment. So what are we doing? We'll add that into our new test in a second. So we'll create a new one of these and add that into that, right? So I know what I need to do first, though. I need to just say post load user. So let's reload and hello. So we can see it actually worked. Hello world, save. Okay, nothing happens, but when I cancel, you can see it's actually updated in the background. So the only thing I've left to do now is actually to dismiss the state of this so that it basically goes back to its previous state. So that, like, it's gonna, what I want to basically have it not editing anymore, right? Because I've just saved it. So to do that, I need to do something in my list, right? So in here, you can see I'm calling it update post. So I'm gonna just say on update. So yeah, so what we'll do is this one, okay. So let's say on update post, and then up here we will add a new handler saying on update post is equal to text and do something, right? So whoops, that's not what we wanted. Whoops. Okay. So what we're saying is update post ID text, but we're also going to say set is editing to false. There's one problem with this. So that's going to work. So if I go edit and I say hello world again and press save, it'll save it and it'll update it. Fair enough. That's cool. The problem is that it's going to set is editing to false even if this fails. Right, so I'm not mad keen about that. It's it feels a little clunky to me. So if this produces an error, ideally we would want to show an error message to the user and actually leave the edit form visible, right? So we don't want to have that happen. So what I'm thinking is we might add a callback in here. So say set is editing to false. And then what we'll do is in our update post, we will have a callback. And essentially we'll say in here, we'll say callback. That might work. So let's say hello world again. One more time for the road and save. Okay, that works. So what that would mean then is that if we ran into an error, it would error out to the console for now, but it would also keep it open, right? So if I were to, I don't know, let's say throw, how do we throw an exception in JavaScript? In JavaScript, I'll forget how to do this. Oh, no, not W3 schools, go away. Throw, yeah, okay. So throw useless error. So if I do that and I say blah, 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 and say save, use this error, but it hasn't, like it's basically gone back to this, right? So actually something that might be quite nice to do in that case is something I'm not going to address now. So I was going to say you could like maybe focus on it here, but to do that would actually be a bit of a pain because our focus state is in the edit post form. So we'd need to like kick that the entire way back. So I'm not gonna worry about that for now, right? So let's just get rid of that and let's see. So we'll just make sure this is still working. This is still working, right? Press save, boom, reload, boom, it's still updated, perfect. So that's our update done. I'm running out of time here, so I am going to probably just do one more thing on the editing of the posts. So let's see. So yeah, so the issue that we have is that we now have the same problem in our edit post feature here, where, well, firstly, we need to test that it's actually bringing back the user relationship, because that was a thing that I missed there and it caused a problem. But the second thing is we would need to implement authorization. So this is actually pretty easy. We can just say this authorize. Let's see, it's an editor update. I can never remember. It's update. Okay, so this authorize update post, and that will do that. And we can obviously say return int user ID is equal to int post user ID, just like we did with delete, right? So a bit of duplication, but I'm cool with that. I'm cool with having different methods in there for update and delete. Just if we ever did want to separate out the logic around who could update something and who could delete something, I think that would be quite useful. So the next thing I'd want to do is I just want to make sure that my tests actually account for that, right? So if I come into this, we have this users can only delete their own posts. I think we should just basically have can only update their own posts as well. So we'll have user, we'll have own post, and then what we'll say is we'll have a put request onto that. And we'll say we'll put in text is updated text, something like that, right? Doesn't really matter anyway. And that should assert the status of 200. And we should also see this, right? So let's say, where is that gone? So check that it returns the username. So assert JSON fragment, and we will say what exactly? On post. Come on. On post username. So that's that, and then we also want to say test that I can't update other users' posts. So let's just update some comments here. And create, and again we'll put, and we will say text is updated text, and that should also return a 4. So if we do PHP unit, success passing, perfect. Okay, so that's basically the last thing that I wanted to do around edits. So if we update that to-do list, we should have one more thing to check off. So there's 2 things that I haven't managed to get through. I'm just wondering, do I have time to... So what time have we? 25 to. I'm going to need to leave in 10 minutes. So 5 minutes to get the command and enter thing working. It's probably optimistic. Fuck it, let's do it anyway. Okay, so let's say npm install. I know I'm going to use a hotkeys.js, I think, library. Joel, come on, save. So we'll install hotkeys.js. So one of the things that I'm going to want to do here is I'm basically going to want to create a hook. Now, I know there's a hook out there that I can use to actually wire up hotkeys.js, but I've tried this before and I had a problem with it. So I think if I go hotkeys hook react, there's this library, but if I remember correctly, there's an issue where something in the text area, no, input. Maybe this isn't, maybe it's not this one. So, whoa, what the heck? Okay, yeah, it's just reloading. That's fine. Yes, I think it's this one. Yeah, so the problem with this, right, is the hotkeys. So the hotkeys component that this is using, I'm pretty sure what I need to do is I need to actually apply a filter on this to return true in order to get. So if I open up hotkeys.js, I think it filters out on like text area. So if I go filters, I know it's filters or filter or not. Oh man, this is not working for me. So I should probably just leave it be for today. But let's see, filter. Yeah, filter. This is the thing. Yes. So by default, hotkeys are not enabled for input select text area elements. Hotkeys.filter to return to the true shortcut keys to set to play a role. False shortcut setup failure. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm almost positive that this needs to happen in order for this to work on a text area. And when I look at this, there's no way for me to hook that in here, right? So I'm going to need to create my own version of this hook. So if I bring up my sidebar here, let's create a hook, and we'll call it use hotkey.jsx, and let's bring this in. And there's a couple of things. So I'm not using TypeScript right now, so I'm going to just get rid of all the TypeScript syntax in here because it's no good to me. On that, I might look at using TypeScript in this project at a later point in time, because it is something that I do want to experiment with and look at using. Okay, so we've got use effect, and what I want to do now is I want to say hotkeys.filter is equal to and return true, I think, is what we want to do there. Okay, so is that it? Return hotkeys by keys, memoize callback, memoize callback. I think that's it. So if I have that hook, then what I want to do, right? So essentially what I want to do is when I type some stuff in here, I want to basically say command and enter or control and enter on Windows and have that actually post. But as I do it right now, it's not working, right? So what I should be able to do with this hook is essentially use it in my post form. So if I jump back to my post form, I should be able to bring in the hook in here, right? So if I say import use, from hooks use hotkey. So use hotkey from hooks use hotkey. Export const. I just want to keep my syntax in pretty much consistent shape, so we'll do that. And then I've got my hotkey on here, which I'm not exporting it as default, so we'll do it this way. And let's see, what do we want to do? We want to say on post form use hotkey, and what do we need to pass into it? So we need to pass in a code. I'm going to pass in a hotkey code. And then what else do we need to pass? I can't remember now. So let's see, we need to pass in, so the keys, the callback, and the dependencies. So the keys are going to be the hotkey code. I'll define that in a second. The callback function is a submit function, which we shouldn't need to change. And the the dependencies on this are text and is valid, right? So that should be that, but I also need to define the hotkeys, or the hotkey code, but I'm going to do that at the very top because I'm using them in other places as well. So we're going to say hotkey code is equal to, I can never remember the syntax of this. I think it's, let's say command plus enter. So let's see. That didn't work. Time-wise, okay, 5 minutes. Object is not a function at post form. Right, let's see, use hotkey. or cons, that's fine. Use hotkey. Yeah, use hotkeys. Hello. Let's use hotkey. And also, I have a typo. So I'm saying use hotkey like this. Okay, that works. So if I say hello, oh, boom, works. Okay, but I have a new problem, and that's if I press Command and Enter, it's going to submit anyway. So I want to stop that from happening. So let's see. I probably need to think about doing that in my store post here. If I do have is valid in here, right? Yeah, because otherwise it's going to submit, because I don't do it in the. I'm just kind of assuming that, like, because the post button is disabled, that it's going to stop from submitting the form. But if I have another hook into submitting the form, then it doesn't really matter. It's going to skip that, right? So if I do this and then reload and say this shouldn't submit, it's still submitted. Okay, so that didn't work. Did I save that? I thought I did. Rebuilding. Why is it rebuilding? Let's just run watch again, just in case it didn't actually take effect. So we can close this, close this, close this, close this. Come on, hurry up. I need to go. So no chat at all today. I think I saw a few viewers pop in as we were working through it, but yeah, nobody on the chat. Okay, so let's see. Submit, question mark. Ah, go away. Why are you doing that to me? Oh, I'm an idiot. Sorry. You can tell I've been streaming for an hour because, yeah, that's what I wanted to test, was that when it was empty, it wouldn't submit, which is actually happening. So I've actually got that fixed now, which is perfect. The last thing I want to do is actually two more things. We do have time. So the use hotkey, I want to do that on my edit form. So right now, if I go edit, press Command Enter, nothing. So I want the same thing to happen on that form. So again, I need to come back to these forms and normalize them, because there's a lot of similarities between them. So I'm going to put the use hotkey down at the bottom. In here, we have submit is the same thing. Text and is valid are the same. And I don't think I need anything else. Oh, hey. Or redemption. Yes, I am a developer by trade. I'm the CTO of a startup company called WorkVivo. I've been developing software for professionally since about 2007, and unprofessionally for a lot longer than that. So yeah, I've been developing for quite a long time. I've been using React for probably the last 2 years, 2.5 years maybe. And I've been working with like Laravel PHP for longer than that. Previous life worked in C#, .NET, XJS, Sencha Touch, PL SQL, believe it or not. So I've worked with a lot of different frameworks, languages, and toolkits over the years. But my current tool set of choice is React Native at the front end, Tailwind CSS for my CSS framework, and Laravel PHP at the back end. I also do a lot of stuff with AWS on the infrastructure side as well. Okay, so what was it that I wanted to get working here? So I wanted to check if there was any dependencies that I needed to consider for my edit form. So just 1 second. What am I doing? I think I need to, let me see, what do I need to do? Let's just try that and see what happens. So if I edit, okay, that's going to submit. So it's working, but it's submitting it even when I haven't edited. So it's not taking the validity into effect. And I wonder, is that because there's something else needed in here? Use hotkey code, submit text is valid. Doesn't seem to be paying attention to the is valid bit, which is interesting. Not sure. going on there? Is it? Oh no, it's because, sorry. So if I clear that out, it won't work because the given data was invalid. So it is submitting it. Let's go back up to. Actually, these probably shouldn't be at that top level. So I can't really do an is valid in here because oh man, what am I going to do with this? So I might have to leave this until the next time. So sorry, I'm in the wrong one. Use hotkey, text, and is valid. I don't think I need anything else. Unless I'm doing something stupid here, which I don't think I am. How's update post? How's that working? Update post text. Oh yeah, because that's going to call the parent. Okay, so hello works. If I say hello, even when it hasn't been edited, it still works, even though is valid is false. And also, if I clear out the text, it's going to try and submit it, which I don't want to happen. I'm going to have to come back to this and fix this as the first thing I do on the next stream. So, because I really do need to run. You're waiting for your chance to get to play with Tailwind. Looking forward to seeing more of your app. Yeah, Tailwind is really, really, really cool. So I think for most people, when they see it first, they kind of have a similar reaction to what people had when they saw JSX for the first time in React. It was like separation of concerns. Oh my God, why have you got all of this stuff stuck in your HTML, right? So we didn't like JSX at first because we were putting like on-click handlers and state essentially into our HTML, and it just felt weird. And I think people are having the same reaction with Tailwind a little bit, where they're seeing all of these CSS classes like put into the HTML, and I think people see things like this, right? So this example that I'm showing on the screen at the moment, where we have like about 10 classes added on to this button component. And it looks messy, like it looks why are we doing it this way? But I think the beauty of it is that, like, firstly, I don't have to maintain any CSS, right? I mean, the Tailwind classes are very comprehensive, so it means I can really build out a pretty incredible UI without ever having to write any CSS at all. And the other thing is that Tailwind works amazingly well with component-based JavaScript frameworks like React, like Vue, like Svelte, because what I'm going to do, in the near future is I'm going to take this button component that I have here, and I'm going to extract that out into another component, a button component essentially, and I'm then going to have a lot of configuration that I'm going to be able to pass into that button through props, which will determine what it should be styled as. So the reason that people don't like this kind of like a lot of classes being added in here is because they're rightly concerned that if I ever need to change something, I'm now going to need to change these class names everywhere that I'm using a button, which obviously isn't great. So wouldn't it be better to have this as a single class? And like the great news is that there's two ways that we can address this. The first is just to rely on React components to handle all of this for us, so that if we ever need to make a change, then we can just change it in that single button component in React. Or if we're not using something like React or Vue or Svelte, Tailwind actually has your back already. So if we go into the Tailwind docs really quickly, and I really do need to go, but if we jump in really, really quickly and just look up the apply directive. So I'm after going into some tutorial here. So if I look up apply, composing utilities, functions and directives, here we go. So this apply, what I can do is basically use this to create my own custom CSS components that include some of the utility classes from Tailwind. So in this example here, you're seeing like a button component being created by basically applying all of these classes. And then all I'd have to do is in here, instead of having all of this, I could just basically do that, right? And then if I wanted it to be blue, say button blue. Just like you would in something like, Bootstrap or Foundation or one of the kind of more traditional CSS frameworks. So yeah, I think a lot of the gripes that people have with Tailwind firstly, they like don't have them after they've actually tried it themselves. And secondly, there's solutions to them. I mean, you can either use a supply directive or you can just abstract it out into a React component, and your reusability concerns are addressed. I don't like this. So you can see here where like I've got this. This is particularly messy because I have some logic in here around whether this button is valid or not, or whether the state is valid or not. I want to apply different classes. I will come back to that in a future stream where we're going to look at some libraries that we can pull in, which will actually help us to take this logic and actually do something a little bit differently up here. So I think there's like a class names library which we might use, or we might use something else, which will actually make it easier to tidy this stuff up, so that when we're actually including it in the component in the JSX, it's going to be something like class name is equal to submit button class names or something like that instead, which will be a bit tidier. So we'll come back to that in a future stream. Okay, so with that, I'm going to have to go. Or Redemption, thanks for joining in on the chat, and anybody who's viewing, thanks for watching. Anybody who picks us up after the stream on YouTube, again, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe on whatever platform you're using, Twitch, YouTube, or even Periscope. Follow me on Twitter to see any future live streams every Monday and Thursday at 4 p.m. GMT, which is 11 a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Pacific. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.